Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dancing Oracle with our amazing astrologer, Heather Cohen. Welcome, Heather, to the show.
Hi.
You have some
Thank you.
exciting things to tell us about the outer
Thank you so
planets and how
much.
they affect us personally and as a collective. Thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you so much. And forgive me, you guys. This is really early in the morning for
I
me.
know.
I'm doing my best here. Um, what can I say? I've been really feeling the shift of the planets. I'm wondering if you all have too. There's an excitement, there's a possibility. And with all movement, there's like the challenging side and the good side, right? Like life is just a mixed bag. And so I don't want to paint things in a rosy picture, nor do I want to be super dramatic and make it all doom and gloom, because I don't think anything's ever like that.
Yeah.
So what is most present for me right now, and we've kind of been moving, we stopped at Jupiter. And when we get to Saturn, Saturn is boundaries, right? So Saturn is physicality. And so Saturn's also the boundary between the personal planets and the transpersonal planets. It's sort of like the last embodiment before we sort of move into a transpersonal, more collective state. So Saturn is the border between the personal and the transpersonal planets.
Now, how long for our viewer audience does Saturn take to go around so they get an
Yeah,
idea?
so Saturn will spend 2.5 years in each sign. And so Saturn has been in Pisces, probably a super challenging place for Saturn to be because Pisces is the most um, kind of flowing, expansive, diffuse of the signs. Pisces is the repository of all the signs, right? So it's the end, and Aries is the beginning. And so the difference between Aries and Pisces is probably the largest gap in signs of any of them, right? Because you're going from the complete end to the complete beginning. And in traditional moon calendars, Aries or March is the beginning of the year. So
Yeah,
this
yeah, for sure.
is like the
Spring.
beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so we've moved into this solar calendar, which is a lot different and sort of throws off our seasons and our times. So anyway, when things move from Pisces to Aries, there's a massive shift in energy because Pisces is all about flowing and being, and Aries is the spark of creation. It's all about doing. And so Saturn is quite the doer, right? Because Saturn is earthy, practical. It has to do with discipline and it has to do with mastery. So Saturn uses discipline in order to create mastery. And so when you have, and it's already happened. I think it was in June of 2025.
Yeah. Yeah.
Saturn moved into Aries, and it will be there for 3 or 4 months. So we get a little preview. And then what it's going to do is it's going to retrograde back into Pisces for 5, 6 months. And then we'll fully settle in Aries in March of 2026. And so we're getting a preview right now of what Saturn in Aries looks like. And of course, where it falls in your chart is going to make a huge difference here. So again, we gave you the information about looking on astrocafe.com,
Yes.
but highly recommend that. And what you do is type into your browser free astrology chart Astro Cafe, and the first thing that shows up on your browser, that's what you're going to look at. And I have no affiliation with this website, just so you know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's the easiest thing to use, the easiest tool. And so that's where you can find where Saturn is in your actual chart. And what I mean by where Saturn is what house it's placed in. Because that'll tell you what area of life is really being affected. And so when you have Saturn and Aries in, let's say, your sixth house, which is your house of pets, rentals, daily routines, self-care, then Saturn and Aries there is really going to be this spark of like, all right, time to get moving in this area of your chart. And Saturn's going to what Saturn really does at first is it sort of bears down and creates some sort of crisis. So the sixth house can be like health issues or something comes up and you're like, oh God, I've got to change my daily routines. I have to change how I do things. And Aries initiates, right? So Aries
Yeah.
is like, I'm going to start something new. And Saturn is like, that's great. But if you start something new, you're going to need to create a really solid foundation because Aries is quite the starter and kind of a poor finisher. So, so Saturn is going to give this
Yeah.
grounded longevity to Aries's spark of creative energy. Aries, forges ahead with courage and creativity and passion. And Saturn's kind of like dry and a little cold and a little curmudgeon-y and dull. And so Aries gives this like beautiful spark to this wherever area of your chart Saturn is sitting right now.
Okay.
And so that happens on a personal level and a transpersonal level, of course. And Aries is also the god of war. And so I'm not suggesting that there's going to be a war. That's not the feeling I'm getting. It's more the idea that there's revolution and change in store for all of us. And that revolution can be, you know, it can be technological, it can be emotional, it can be ecological. So I'm not here to predict violence, but I
Yeah.
am saying that there's a move towards change that's happening when you have Aries. Pisces is like kumbaya, we are the world, and Aries is like things need to change, things need to be different. I'm going to initiate a spark that will create something new. And so Saturn in Aries, there's a little bit of there can be some frustration around the Aries like forging ahead without kind of checking things out and making sure they're okay first. Aries is very much like leap before you look, and Saturn is look before you leap. And so they're quite opposite in that way.
Yeah,
Um,
they really are.
but
Yeah,
the
completely.
Yeah, so they're different in that way, and there can be a rub with that because there can be things that you really want to do that you're like, okay, I see my goal, and Saturn's like, great, and then you're going to proceed in this slow, tedious detail to create the foundation you need to do that thing you want to do. And Aries will give so much creativity, such a push towards, Aries also has to do with the body naturally. And so there's this, because Aries really rules the first house, and the first house is our rising sign, right? And
Mhm.
so there's this kind of
Appearance.
shift towards identity, right? So there'll be something around appearance or something around a change in your identity, and how you're showing up in the world. And my sense is that everyone will be moving towards more health because Aries is very much the body, and Saturn is also the body and body structure, although Saturn rules the bones. So all the like muscular skeletal system is ruled by Saturn, and Aries rules the head. So there'll be something around the body and the mind that I'm feeling like a collective move towards more healthfulness in the body will be a big thing that's up in the collective. Um,
So I was thinking to ask you, because I just went into Astro Cafe. So
yes.
just like for our audience, for the personal, more personal, if they went in there and they saw like Saturn and Capricorn, and you're talking about Saturn's and Aries, and would
Right.
they be like, how would they say, well, what house is my
Exactly.
Saturn in
So if
right
you
now? Like right
scroll
now?
down, right. So what you'll see in Astro Cafe is actually your natal chart. That's where Saturn was when you were born.
Yes.
And Saturn has a 28 to 32 year cycle. It's
Okay.
huge,
Here.
right? So Saturn will only be in the same place that you were born, 28 to 32, which is called Saturn return, 58 to 62, second Saturn return, and if you live long enough, 88 to 92. So that's the 30-year swaths. When you want to look at where Saturn is in your chart currently,
Yeah.
where Aries is in your chart currently, you look to the houses. So if you scroll down, Najia, you'll notice that it will list off the houses and you'll see where natal Saturn is in your chart. And this is getting like way into like deep astrology. So it's a little complicated for a layperson to do this.
Yeah.
I'll give you the best information I can, but in
Yeah.
general, you would need either an astrological class or you would need a personal reading to get deep into this stuff.
And you do classes currently? Are you doing
I
classes?
do. I'm
Yeah.
offering classes. I offer classes online and in person, and you can definitely reach out for that. But if you're looking, you'll notice that your natal Saturn is in a certain house in Capricorn.
Hmm.
And then what you'll do is you'll count how many signs is Capricorn from Aries. It's very close, right? It's 3 signs away.
Hmm.
And so then that would mean that Saturn in Aries would be in your third house now, currently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, because I kind of thought of it like, oh, right now, because Aries is 3 away from Capricorn.
Right. So
Got
you
it.
have Capricorn, right? So it would be Capricorn,
Aquarius, Aries.
Aquarius, Aries, right? So that's 3 signs away.
Yeah, so it's a wheel, just so everyone knows it's a wheel.
Yes, it's a wheel, it's cyclic, and it's pretty complicated. I mean, figure it took me about 5 years to learn this, so you're not going to get it in 10 minutes looking at a chart. But I can say that Saturn moving into Aries will have a profound effect on everyone, I think, in a positive way.
Yeah.
But I tend to look at things as, it's all positive, even the challenges. So that's Saturn in Aries. Najia, do you have any questions or comments about that that might help elucidate this for people, for your viewers, because you know them better than I do?
So I would say to the viewers, because then tell me if I'm correct, because Aries is always in a new start,
Yes,
and that and I think Saturn is also kind of karmic and disciplined, that we're going to just, no matter what area of our chart it shows up in, all of us right now are going to feel that profound change in our lives.
absolutely. And you would start
Profound.
feeling it now.
Mhm.
Um, and fire moves quickly. So even though
Mm.
Saturn's slowing Aries down,
Yeah, thank
there's
God, right?
a sense of movement and initiative and action that you would not have gotten with Saturn and Pisces. Like Saturn and Pisces is the slow grind and a lot of with Pisces being very, very diffuse and Saturn being very, very concentrated, um, they're less compatible. I would
Yeah.
say less compatible signs than Saturn and Aries. They're kind of on the same track, but just going at a different pace, I would say. But they're in the same direction.
Yeah, and then people get a taste of it for a few months and then it sits,
And then it goes
go
back into
back to where we
Pisces.
were.
Yep.
It
So
felt
then
like,
you go
you
back.
know,
Yeah. And you're going to check out what Saturn does is Saturn checks out, when you build something and you take your hands and you kind of shake it to make sure that it's still good, like let's say you built a bed and you're like, "Oh, let me feel this and shake it before I lie on it." Well, that's kind of what Saturn's doing. Saturn goes back and they're kind of like, "All right, like have you learned the lesson? Is the foundation good?" And Saturn really rewards hard work.
mm,
So if you've worked hard on the area of your life that Saturn is in, then Saturn rewards you well with a gift. Saturn is definitely the gift for hard work planet.
yeah.
So you'll see a very kind of personal, physical manifestation that comes from Saturn if you've followed his wishes. And if you hadn't, he's not
Mm,
happy. He's not
yeah.
happy with that. Yeah.
And Saturn always dips back, just as it moves,
All the
always,
planets always
always
dip
dip
back.
back.
So there's And when I say retrograde, really all it means is that the planet stands still in the sky. Like it doesn't really go backwards, but it appears to go backwards because it kind of stops in its tracks. And so that happens with all the signs almost every year. There's either every year or 2 years, there's a retrograde motion. And the retrograde is simply to review.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
that like the idea is that you're not just moving forward, moving forward, moving forward, but there's this integration and stopping and really reflecting. It's kind of like the masculine and feminine, where it's like, okay, we've moved forward, we've done this. Let's stop and reflect and refine and see what's happening here. So it's no different than regular life. The
I love
planets stop and reflect just like we do.
I love how you explain it because I think for a lot of clickbait or whatever, people do a lot of astrologers, will just talk about like those retrogrades being difficult in many areas, but in reality, they're a chance to integrate, reflect, review, really go over things
Yeah,
that
I
serves
think
you.
that giving it that spin is sort of a human reaction to it,
Yeah,
when you
human.
want to
Yeah,
go forward but it's actually very neutral what's happening. you know,
yeah. It is
it's
balance.
very like, this is what happens. This is what happens with animals. This is what happens in nature. This is what happens in the sky. It's very natural. And I think of it as so necessary. And so sort of characterizing it as good and bad, I think it doesn't serve us to do that.
Yeah, it's like taking advantage of the energies. So we're
Yeah,
aware of this energy and what it produces for us. A lot of times we
exactly.
hear about Mercury retrogrades because they have so
Exactly.
the fast planet, so it moves so quickly. And
Yeah,
everyone's like, don't do this, don't do this. And it's like, well, maybe you don't sign a contract that week, but you review your contracts.
exactly. It's
That's the
all
energy.
about like stopping, integrating, reviewing, refining, and it's so helpful.
Yes.
I think it's just what's challenging for people is when reality doesn't do what they want. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
the fact is, like, reality always wins. And so, what astrology does is sort of points you to, like, here's the flow of what's going on. You can fight it if you want. You'll be kind of miserable, just like when you fight anything that's happening in reality that you don't like. But if you're just like, oh, okay, really trusting that what's lined up is better than what our mind can think of, like what our mind thinks is the right thing, you kind of have to give over to the universe of like,
No. No.
I think I know the right thing, but clearly the universe is showing me what the right thing is because that's what's actually happening, you
Yeah.
know?
The universe conspires to, bring us to our highest points.
Exactly. And I feel like I found that time and time again, even if there's sort of momentary disappointments or difficulties, it's always gearing and aligning you towards the highest. And so once you get used to that process of just letting go, like, all right, I thought that was a good idea, but clearly the universe doesn't, then
Yes.
you can move forward so much more easily without the resistance.
Now, we spend a lot of time on Saturn, but it's a very impactful
It's
planet
such an
of
important
all
planet.
for us personally.
It is, and also because people have a distasteful feeling towards it, because Saturn's challenging us to grow and grow up and mature, and it puts limitations on us. So it's all the things that people don't really like. But it happens to be I think it's the most useful, effective planet in the zodiac.
It always leaves with a gift,
It
right?
always leaves with a gift, and the intentions are so good. It's kind of like the father principle, and it really is in astrology. It's the father principle of like, okay, how can you show up in a way that is in your highest and best? And it kind of pushes you towards that level of integrity um, that we need as people.
So what is our next planet?
Okay, so our next planet is Uranus, and I also love Uranus. So Uranus is called the Great Awakener, and Uranus is the only planet that orbits the sun sideways. Like it got hit by an asteroid at some point that knocked it off its axis. So it literally is like tilted as it rotates
Oh,
around
you
the
mean its poles are tilted completely?
completely tilted.
Oh,
So they, the ancients called Uranus the eccentric, right? Because it literally is eccentric. Its orbit's eccentric, its tilt is eccentric. And so Uranus has ruled eccentricity for a very long time. And so Uranus is usually prominent with like inventors or humanitarian visionaries. Like that's what Uranus rules. It's
yeah.
like people who are looking far into the future, like Edison or Einstein. They're like, I see something that's way beyond what Galileo, like the people who see beyond what's actually happening right now, right? And in a way, it's the opposite of Saturn, right? Because Saturn's
Yeah.
all about reality right now, facing reality. And Uranus is like, oh, but I see something in the distant future that in collapsing timelines can be our now, And so Uranus is kind of like the ancient future, right?
Oh,
And so Uranus is moving from Taurus, which was, again, it's because Uranus is ruled by Aquarius, like Uranus rules Aquarius, it's an air sign. So air and earth, not the best combo. And Uranus was changing our financial systems, changing our relationship to the earth. And then on a personal level, what Uranus does is there's just this flash or sudden shift because Uranus rules sudden shifts. It's like flashes of genius or sudden changes in your life. And so when you have a Uranus transit, and again, you'd have to see where in your chart it's transiting. So if it's transiting your home, for example, you could have a sudden shift in your home where like suddenly, something happens and you have to move, or suddenly this amazing house shows up out of nowhere and you're like, it's time, but it's something that's like fast and sudden. And so it can be something physical like a home, or it can be something emotional or spiritual or intellectual where you suddenly are like, oh, I think I need to start going to bed when the sun sets and waking up when the sun rises. And you just completely shift out of the blue. And so Uranus has been moving through Taurus. And again, Taurus is super slow because it's Earth. And Uranus is sudden flashes of genius. So it's very fast. And so
mm.
when slow goes with fast, there can be frustrations or shocks or, like this. But when Uranus goes into Gemini, that's like a cousin, right? I mean, that's a fellow air sign, super fast. Gemini has to do with communications. And so I'm imagining with Uranus and Gemini, there's going to be a massive shift collectively in the way we communicate, how we communicate, and the rapidness of the communication.
I think
Um,
that's soon, right? Like when I think it moves in any day
well,
now.
there's again, there's all of the fast moving planets. I mean, all the slow moving planets except for Pluto are in sort of a retrograde motion. So you're getting like a teaser right now, roughly, and I'm kind of clumping them all together for time's sake,
Yeah.
roughly between June and let's say November, if you
Mhm.
want to include Neptune, Uranus,
Okay.
Saturn, there'll be this retrograde motion where they'll be in Aries and then they're going to move.
Back
They're going to move back,
for
right?
a
So
little
they're
bit.
going to move into, so Saturn and Neptune will be in Aries, Uranus will be in Gemini, and you'll get a teaser taster. But all of them move fully into the next sign in March of 2026. So by March of 2026, there's no more teasers, there's no more previews. That's it. So
And
all
it's
the planets have fully settled into their new signs, right? So
all
Jupiter,
in fire and air, which is big.
yes. Well,
Huge.
Jupiter will be in Cancer, but all
Yeah.
the other planets. So Uranus will move into Gemini, Neptune will move into Aries, and Pluto will move into Aquarius, fully settled in.
And how long will Uranus be there? Like we'll just say, how long is
Uranus
that
is
cycle
a
about?
7-year cycle. Uranus
7.
is
Okay.
7 years. Neptune is roughly, and this is rough because they spend different times in different signs, but I want to say roughly 14 in Neptune
Okay.
and roughly 20 in Pluto.
Okay, so
Pluto
we're getting,
spends longer in the signs that it's compatible with. So Pluto rules Scorpio and it will spend a longer time in Scorpio. We won't be alive for that, but it will spend a longer time in Scorpio because that's its home sign. Um, so yeah, so Uranus in Gemini on the personal level, and when I say the personal level, what it means is that when the planet aspects the degrees of your personal chart. And again, I can't go into this any
yeah.
further at this very, very short juncture, but to say there are moments when it becomes very, very personal. And that's the angles that it hits, the house that it hits, and the planets that it's in relationship in your chart. You'll notice a very, again, this would be like a rapid change in wherever Gemini is prominent in your chart. So, for example, let's say you have Gemini in your eighth house, right? And
Mhm.
that's where Uranus is. So Uranus will create a sudden change when it comes to financial matters. It can affect taxes, inheritance, joint resources, and intimacy. So you will have sudden
Mm.
changes in that area of your chart, right? So that's just an example of where it hits personally. But on a collective level, I think everything with AI, everything with it can also do like have to do with transportation, Gemini. So
Oh, yeah.
transportation could change over the next 7 years in some, I think we're already seeing it with like the robo taxis, but I think more of that will be happening
But
with
even
Uranus and
electric
Gemini.
cars, because that's
Yep.
Uranus
Electric
energy.
cars. Yeah. So it's like, again, yes, you're absolutely right. It has to do with creative, forward thinking, futuristic. That's all Uranus and Gemini territory. And because also Gemini has to do with your local neighborhood. So Gemini and Sagittarius are opposites. And so
Mm.
Sagittarius would be foreign travels and foreign studies, international. And Gemini is local. And Gemini also has to do with communications with other cultures, other languages. So there could be also new technology coming out where you're able to communicate in different languages with much more ease and facility. So these are just, this is like guesses on my part when I'm looking at these two signs. But that's what I would look at or look for in some ways, massive changes in communication and transportation, and massive technological leaps in those areas moving very quickly.
So we got a basic overview of these slower moving planets, but we can go into more depth.
Yes.
Neptune and Pluto.
Yes,
Time
let's do
we meet.
Neptune. Yeah, let's do that next time we meet. Just a little preview of Neptune is just to say Neptune moving into Aries is kind of similar to when Saturn was in Pisces because Neptune is ruled by Pisces, right? So
Mhm.
there's definitely this sort of um saturated, diffuse, dreamy, kind of illusion filled um feeling of Neptune, where it's
Mhm.
this very diffuse, ineffable kind of planet and energy. And then Aries coming in like, pow, all right, we're going to take all that dreamy, spiritual, kind of one love kind of feeling, and we're going to actually do something with it. So I'm super curious about how Neptune and Aries is going to show up. And again, it's 14 years. So it's massive amount of time. It's pretty much like a generation or two of time that we'll see that unfold. But I think it should be very, very interesting because again, we're moving into that, like moving from Pisces into Aries. I think that step is a larger move for humanity than any other sign change.
It kind of sounds like enlightenment in a way, right? Do you think like a shift in consciousness? Do you feel like it would be?
I think it could be a shift in consciousness. I think it could be a lot of things, because Aries is fire has to do with spirit too. Like fire and water both have that spirit quality to them. But with Aries, it's very physicalized. Aries is physical, just like Saturn. And I'm like, oh, how is that going to be with healing in the body or body work? I don't know. We'll have to go into it
Go
more
into
next time, but
Yeah,
that's
we'll
my
go into
sense
it.
of it.
We'll go
Yeah.
into it more next time. So we have time because Heather made
Yeah.
just carved out whatever time she could this morning before she
Yes.
goes off to Italy to plan her retreat. I met
Yes.
Heather on a retreat. I was lucky to study in person with her
Yes.
in
That was
Asheville.
amazing.
So she does
Yeah.
travel
We're
the world and she does meet on Zoom with other people in groups.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I've been playing with is just weaving all the mystical arts. So
Yeah.
music, dance, singing, painting, and astrology and tarot. So all of our workshops that I'm collaborating on would be of that nature. And it's such a cool combination. Yeah, it's working for me.
Yeah. So tell us about your website. I will put it in the description box as well as her name and contact. Yeah.
Absolutely. I can just say my website. It's a little complicated to write out because there's two T's. So it's event, tarot, and astrology.com. Event, tarot, astrology, and astrology.com. So check it out. I would love to meet you and speak with you more. And again, thank you so much for bringing me on to just share this information because I just love talking about this stuff so much. It's so fun for me. So this is a fun way to start my morning.
Oh, thank you, Heather, so much. All
All
right,
right.
everyone. We'd love to hear from you in the comments if you have any
Yes.
questions, what you'd like us to do next. Of course, we're going to finish the other two planets, but going forward, just let us know what you'd like. She's going to be back.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, that was